Hello, and welcome to the Evolve Vets podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bethany Weinheimer. Hey friend, and welcome back to the Evolve Vets podcast. I'm Dr. Bethany Weinheimer, and today we're talking about something that almost every veterinarian I've coached, mentored, or worked alongside has struggled with. But very few of us want to name it or claim it, honestly, and it is perfectionism. Not high standards, not the attention to detail, just I care a lot. But really, the truth is, at the bottom of it, it's all rooted in perfectionism. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Perfectionism is often self-punishment disguised as professionalism. It's all across the industry. It's all across veterinary medicine. And it is truly everywhere. So today, I want to spend some time deep diving on what is perfectionism and how do we name it if we have some components of that in our life. Hello, I'm a recovering perfectionist too. And then I also want to understand, what does the research actually say about burnout and moral stress? And how does that relate back to perfectionism? And I want us to deeper understand why your nervous system is wired this way. How do we actually get to this place? And then how do we begin to heal it and work back from that place to really start to live an evolved and an empowered life? Also, the other component about that is that there's usually this fear associated with lowering your standards if you want to fight perfectionism. But really, perfectionism isn't about lowering your standard. It's truly about wanting to rise yourself so that way you can have space for mistakes, which do happen because, shocker, we're all human. So for part one, the story we tell ourselves. Let me start with something super real. There was a time in my career when I would replay cases over and over and over again in my head for days. And I would reread each script, each textbook, and wonder if I made the right choice. I would, worry about that black cat that discharged early, a euthanasia conversation that I wasn't sure if it went well or if I should have said that right thing, or even a post-op complication. And in all honesty, the other reality behind this is, even if my outcome was totally clinically appropriate and my colleagues reassured me, even if the client was grateful at the end of the day, I would lie in bed, awake, and think I should have caught that sooner. I should have explained it better. I don't know why I didn't think of that differential. And the truth is, no one was criticizing me. This is all in my own head, and that's where it came from. But my inner voice, it was relentless, and I was so terrified to make a mistake, paralyzed by the thought of being a failure, being a bad veterinarian. And I used to think that voice was what made me great because it made me very detail-oriented, very structured, very in the weeds, which is a really great thing when you're a doctor. But the truth is, when it starts to paralyze you and create over anxiety, that's when it becomes harmful. And that's when it leans in from excellence to perfectionism. So when I realized this, I started to realize that voice in my head wasn't actually making me better. It was the thing that was keeping my nervous system in threat mode. We talk about the 4 F's here at the Evolve Vets: flight, fight, freeze, and fawn. And those are the most common ways that this can show up in our daily practice as veterinarians when we're tempted to have that perfectionistic side of us come out. When your nervous system is threatened, it actually can lead to a place of burnout. And we'll deep dive on this more throughout the episode. I see this story time and time again with veterinarians that I coach, people that I lead. It is a common theme across not only men, but also women in veterinary medicine. And it's something a lot of the people that come to our community desperately want help with and want to do well. Now, let's just say perfectionism and striving to be great are different. And let's break those down. Healthy striving, right, is saying, I really want to grow. I want to do my best, or when I make a mistake, which I will, how can I learn from it? A mantra that I actually developed for myself when I was learning this process of admitting that I was a perfectionist was saying, I'm allowed to make mistakes and I can learn from them. And that was huge. Giving myself permission to make mistakes and not be perfect incredibly changed my life. Now, on the other side of that, perfectionism says, what will they think about me? Should I have known better? Do better, do better, do better. That one came up for me a lot. Be better, be good. And I've even had moments where young Dr. Bethany said, I hate you for not doing the right thing or making that choice. There was research published in Frontiers Psychology that found physicians with high levels of maladapted perfectionism were actually significantly more likely to experience emotional exhaustion and depersonalization. These are two core components of burnout. So let's deep dive what each of these mean and better understand what this research proves. Emotional exhaustion. What is emotional exhaustion? Emotional exhaustion is the feeling of being emotionally overextended and depleted of emotional resources. What's that actually mean? It's that you have nothing left to give. There's a physical tiredness in how you show up to work, even outside of work. It impacts all areas of your life. It's relational depletion. In veterinary medicine, emotional exhaustion looks like this: feeling drained before your shift even starts, having no capacity for more hard conversations, wanting silence instead of connection with other people. We are wired for connections. When we start to avoid that, that's usually a sign. Feeling irritated by normal client questions. Our patience just narrows down a little bit more. Crying in your car more than usual. It's okay to cry on a normal euthanasia day where you've had multiple or, that really tough case that didn't make it. But if you're crying every day, going back and forth to work, this is a huge signifier that I would pay close attention to. If it feels like you're running on fumes emotionally, that would be another thing that I would really pay close attention to, that because that usually means you're on this journey to emotional exhaustion or that you're there already. Now, research shows that emotional exhaustion is strongly correlated with stress, chronic stress, actually. And this prolonged activation of our nervous system, when you're constantly on and problem solving and empathizing, or in our case, sometimes delivering bad news, making those really high stakes decisions, and your emotional reserves just deplete. It happens. It happens to a lot of us, unfortunately. Emotional exhaustion doesn't mean that you don't care. The reality is, it means that you usually care so much about everything, every detail, every system, every process that happens in your hospital, every animal that you have to treat, that sometimes your system gets overloaded and eventually gets to a place of shutting down. Now, that's emotional exhaustion. Let's transition into talking about the other side effect, which is depersonalization. Now, what is depersonalization? Depersonalization is a psychological response characterized by our emotional detachment. And it can also often be kind of like a distant attitude, maybe towards patients or work. Maybe it shows up as being cynical around things that happen in our day-to-day lives as veterinarians. In healthcare, burnout research refers to developing a detached or impersonal response to those that you serve. In our case, that would be the pets and usually the people that are attached to them too. So in VetMed, the ways that I see depersonalization coming up is referring to patients by diagnosis or their cage number instead of saying, oh, Robert over there. I give him a human name, but Robert over there, I just had a patient named Robert last week. So Robert over there, is here for a laceration repair, like using the name of our patients. When we start feeling numb during euthanasias, there's nothing. That's usually a sign. When you roll your eyes at another blocked cat, or you're thinking, I just don't care anymore. I can't do this. There's usually more sarcasm that comes in, more cynicism, and usually there's a lot more shame that comes up in these moments as well. Emotionally detaching from clients. This is going to be huge. Usually for me, one of the indicators that I find with depersonalization is when somebody asks, what if it was your dog and I don't have an emotional response? That's usually a sign that I need to take a break or take a step back from work to go heal or do something for me. Now, depersonalization is often a protective mechanism. So it's not you doing this on purpose or you not caring. It's truly your system being overloaded to the point where you can't handle more of an emotional load. And what you'll often hear your nervous system saying is, okay, if I can't handle this, if this is too much and I'm just going to have to shut it down. This is the moment that I have to pause for me. And when this emotional exhaustion remains unchecked and it continues on and goes on longer, that detachment becomes the way that your system knows how to cope. And so that's when we really get into this depersonalization step. Now, there was a research study back in 2022 from Frontiers Vet Science that found a large majority of US veterinarians actually report moderate to high burnout, with emotional exhaustion being the most common component. And there's other research studies that say 86% of veterinarians actually hit this point of burnout through some of these clinical signs that we're seeing here. When emotional exhaustion increases and depersonalization tends to follow. So the pattern usually looks something like this, according to the research: overextension, depletion, emotional shutdown. And that's kind of the steps that we've been walking through together so far on today's podcast. The truth is, perfectionism escalates and accelerates this cascade, because if your internal narrative is, I'm not allowed to fail, I must not disappoint, I must not be criticized, your system never really resets. You never really have that peace or that time to actually get personal with the clients and the pets that you help, or reconnect with the ones that you're at work with. These are the moments that matter the most. Let's think about a reframe. If you're experiencing emotional exhaustion, you're not weak, right? This happens to many of us. This is a natural part of the job. It just is a red flag or a warning sign for you to get help when needed. If you're experiencing depersonalization, you're not heartless. This is completely common in veterinary medicine. It just means you're overloaded. Your system is showing you that you have an issue and it's warranted for more help. And usually this is around the time where I start to have clients come to me for Code Blue coaching. Because with Code Blue coaching, they're sensing this fear, this shutdown. They notice that they need help and they come to me for advice, and we start to work through these things together. Because the truth is, it's about protecting your emotional bandwidth so you don't have to numb yourself to survive. That's what leads to apathy, and that's what leads to so many veterinarians leaving our amazing profession. Now, in veterinary medicine, there are other patterns that show up for us. There was a study by Crane, Phillips, and Karen in 2015 that found that veterinarians with higher traits of perfectionism, guilty, experience more intense moral stress, meaning the ethical dilemmas that they experience hit harder and they linger for longer. I definitely have experienced this throughout my journey as a veterinarian, and learning to cope and process this journey differently is truly helpful. So what does this mean? The very trait that helped you succeed academically actually makes you more vulnerable emotionally and more susceptible to compassion, fatigue, and burnout. Ouch. Perfectionism ties performance to your identity. Been there. And if the case goes well, you're competent, right? You did it. You're a good person. You're a good girl. You did it. You're the best doctor. But then if the case goes poorly, you're the problem. You're not smart enough. How dare you not triple check that dose? That is not excellence. That's confusion amongst your identity and the reality that we're human and we will make mistakes sometimes. So the root for many people, including me, as I'm vulnerably admitting here on this podcast, this goes back to conditional love and praise. For me, we're rewarded in veterinary medicine based on the good grades, and we're praised for performance, being in charge of things, taking more on. That's very common throughout all of veterinary medicine. And now let's actually think about how perfectionism shows up in veterinary medicine. And let's get really specific. I want to talk real examples of what it looks like in VetMed and continue to share more openly about my story with perfectionism and how I've begun to overcome it. But it is an active process that I work through every day. Perfectionism in VetMed looks like this: staying 2 hours late, rewriting medical records. I used to do this one all the time. I was functioning out of lack mindset, fear. I was terrified that I'd be sued by a client. So I needed to be over analytical and type in every single communication because I wanted to make sure each record was perfect. And sometimes if I saw enough cases that day, I would actually spend like 8 hours the day after a really long shift where I didn't get any medical records done, just doing medical records. And that was my perfectionism. Another example can be over-explaining to clients because you're afraid of complaints or that bad Google review. We want to be liked. We have people-pleasing tendencies in veterinary medicine, and I have those too, and it is really hard. Here's another one. Not delegating because you're the only one who can do it that way. Yeah, everyone raise your hand, even if you're in the car by yourself. That one is tough because your plate ends up getting full, you're overextending, and you're not actually taking time to prioritize you. Taking PTO, right? Do you actually unplug from your phone, from your email when you're on PTO? You're up late at night, 2 a.m., and you're replaying that case. It's like a video, replay. What did I miss? How did I say that differently? What else could I be doing? When you feel guilty resting, even on the weekend, or taking a night off to be with your family, or go to that dance recital for your baby, you deserve that. Not celebrating wins because you're already focused on the next thing. You're hustling. This perfectionism creates hustle culture. You have to perform. You have to show up. You have to do the right thing. And we're all trained in this vigilance. I think the other thing that we'll see in VetMed is like being fearful of like what the specialist would think, or that referring veterinarian, or the person that takes my case over next time, like what other people think influences how we show up and kind of reinforces this perfectionism. Let me speak directly to the woman who feels like she's barely holding it all together. You are still competent. You are still high functioning. Your team probably thinks you're fine. Your family probably just thinks you're a little disconnected. But inside, you're exhausted, irritable, disconnected, and wondering if you chose the wrong path. Code Blue coaching is not about quitting veterinary medicine. You've already invested $250,000 or more in your education, and there's also been time, energy, love, and compassion given to VetMed too. This is about reclaiming yourself inside of VetMed instead of giving up on it. Over 6 months, I partner with you and hold your hand as we identify patterns keeping you in survival mode. We rewire the perfectionism loop that constantly happens, rebuild your self-trust and your self-worth, create boundaries you can actually hold, and you have your accountability from yours truly. Don't forget, we also get a one-on-one personalized recovery protocol just for you that will help you for years beyond our coaching time together. So what you get is accountability, nervous system tools, and a true hand-holding pattern that will help you through with a white glove experience. And if you've been waiting for permission to choose yourself, now is the time. Make that extra moment to prioritize you so that way you can sustain your career in VetMed. Now, if this calls to you or you're curious, go to evolvevets.com where you can learn more and book an alignment call with me so that way we can better discuss if this is the right next step for you. I hope to see you in there and that we can stop this Code Blue moment. This hypervigilance will keep your nervous system at a chronic state of activation in this fight or flight that we've talked about. And there have been many that I've coached that are absolutely terrified by their perfectionism that they can't even go into surgery. So anxious that they literally can't go into the surgery suite because there's a fear of making a mistake, a fear of not cutting the right thing, of not doing. Now, a healthy amount of fear is good. I always tell the story. I used to work at the Winnie Carter Wildlife Center with Dr. Alice Blue, and I had so much fun there. And shout out to her if she's listening. But the reality was with this experience was like, I would work with ostriches every day, but I had a healthy amount of fear for this ostrich because I know that if I didn't read the body language appropriately or they were having a bad day, I was going to be the one getting eviscerated. It only takes one click for them to take you down, right? Or one kick, not click. So in those moments, you have to pay attention. It's important to pay attention. And it's important to be focused, but it's also important not to really take on this concept of fear equals safety, because that's not the truth. And so for these veterinarians that I coach and that we have in our community, this severe anxiety for surgery comes from this extreme amount of perfectionism. And we give them space to make mistakes. that actually helps so much. And it's a process, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm going to decide not to be a perfectionist and then everything's magically healed. That's not how this works. It's a journey. And so I just really appreciate everyone who's messaged and DM'd and actually shared some of these vulnerabilities because it is everywhere. And studies show us that chronic stress impairs our cognitive flexibility and executive functioning. What does that mean? The more you push yourself into overdrive, the harder it becomes to think creatively and clearly. And honestly, that armor that once protected you becomes a weight on your shoulders that ends up getting you exhausted, not sleeping, constantly worried, building this sense of anxiety. So the truth is, here's the part that we don't talk about enough. Perfectionism is considered a survival strategy. Many high-achieving women in VetMed find this perfectionism. These are the people that are in our community that are getting coached. They do it because they earned praise. They avoided criticism. They created predictability and safety in these moments. Their brain learned, if I'm perfect, I'm accepted. If I'm perfect, I'm a good girl. If I'm perfect, I'm loved. And the truth is, if you're perfect, none of that is true. It actually brings more weight, more anxiety, more stress. Perfection does not mean safety, but that's what your brain thinks, and that's okay. So when you do make a mistake, your brain doesn't register, okay, that's a learning opportunity. It registers a threat. Your heart races, your stomach drops, it wakes you up at 3 a.m. with anxiety, and you replay it for days. It's almost like I like to think of like an old school movie reel in these moments when I wake up at night with these situations. Your body truly believes you're in danger. And because your inner child, inner teen, or younger version of yourself thought that when you're growing up, that was safety, the truth is it's not. And as adults and developing and growing leaders in veterinary medicine, we have an opportunity to say, no, I'm going to actually focus on just being human and allowing myself to make these mistakes. We talk a lot about burnout in veterinary medicine. It is a common thing, but there's a reason we talk a lot about it because it consumes 86% of veterinarians, which is huge. This was from a frontier study in veterinary science. And it just blows my mind how much of that is workload and how much of that is actually the internal work that we need to focus on. How much of that is self-criticism, self-hate, or overanalyzing every little detail. Because the truth is, our itty bitty shitty committee or our inner critic doesn't clock out. They don't take PTO. Even when you're on vacation, they probably still come out a little bit. Mine sure does. And for me, acknowledging that I've had 5 critical cases in a row and I did it with grace is not the natural go-to, right? It is the thing that stresses me out. It's the thing that keeps me up at night. The truth is, perfectionism erodes joy. It creates emotional numbness and it escalates how fast we reach that depersonalization stage. It makes you feel like you're surviving shifts instead of loving the medicine that we got into this for. Guilty. Me too. I've been there. The gossip, the criticism, and the negativity also have an impact here. It's not just the perfectionism, but why does perfectionism exist? One, like we said, inner child, we grew up that way. We were taught that it was safe. Our whole undergrad experience, we're trying to make great grades. Honestly, before that too. And so perfectionism was reeled in. But then there's this other component. The reason perfectionism runs so deep in veterinary medicine is that it's not just internal, it is external. And let's be honest, this field can be critical, not always in your face, maybe in a group chat, maybe in a break room, maybe on the message board, maybe it's in rounds or a Facebook post about another veterinarian or a DM or that Google review from a client. You know, it's that subtle shift in tone when someone says, interesting choice. Even if it's not directed at you, we all feel it. Even if you've heard another veterinarian or veterinary staff say something negative about a colleague, even if it's not about you, you feel it. You hear how other doctors are talked about. You might see how somebody made a mistake and it became a story that everyone shared. I'll tell you an example from one of my clients. there was a incident where a pet that they had surgery on, they did surgery on, was transferred or seen by another veterinarian for follow-up care because the dog wasn't doing well and it was after hours. And this veterinarian had accidentally left material inside the abdomen of this baby. And unfortunately, what happened was the team that found this case actually sent pictures of the radiographs around to other veterinary professionals. And it destroyed her. But not only did it affect her, it affected all the other veterinarians that saw how somebody would treat them if they made a mistake. You see how someone's mistakes become a story about how they're a bad doctor. And this case is one of many. I've seen ruptured urethras where people want to make comments or, their x-rays weren't taken because they were declined, but that person became the bad veterinarian. And I'm doing air quotes for those of you that are listening and not watching. But the truth is your nervous system quietly takes notes. They don't want to be in this position. And sometimes in those moments, we'll say, if I mess up, I'm next. But that's perfectionism lying to you. And that's how it gets reinforced. Not because you want to be perfect, but because you don't want to be the topic of conversation. None of us want to be misunderstood, judged, criticized, or be labeled as a bad veterinarian. That's not what we want. But perfectionism leads us to this place where we're constantly afraid of that. And we don't give ourselves the space to make mistakes. And we're human, we all will. So the first call to action is, how do we support other veterinarians and veterinary professionals when those mistakes are made, right? Because the truth is, when that happens and you hear somebody talking about another vet or vet professional, you tighten, you double check, you over prepare, you over explain, you avoid risks, you give the extra antibiotic. You avoid speaking up in meetings. Maybe you avoid trying to innovate on something because you're afraid of how it will be received. Not because you lack the confidence, but because psychologically the environment isn't safe. That is veterinary medicine in most places. And the truth is, research on psychological safety is so huge. There was a Dr. Amy Edmondson's work out of Harvard that shows that teams with higher psychological safety have fewer medical errors, better communication, and stronger performance. Not because they're softer, right? The job that they do is the exact same, but it's because they're safer. They can share these moments with the people around them. There's more of an ability and a safety to give feedback. And it allows that perfectionism to take a little bit of a back seat because we're all on the same team, focusing on the process of how to get better. And when we can report medical errors in a psychologically safe way, that actually leads to better outcomes, not only for the pets and for the medicine, right? But for ourselves too, because we're able to take away some of that criticism and judgment that we fear. So remove that fear of humiliation. Your performance will naturally improve. And I found the same thing in my life as I started to decompose and pull back the layers to what perfectionism looked like in my life. The downside is when gossip, criticism are normalized, the amygdala stays on. And that's the part that fight or flight's in our brain. When it's activated, your brain is going to always prioritize protection, not growth. And that's why you replay conversations, you scan for tone, you're over aware of how people are reacting to the things you say and the things you do. It's why you feel a pit in your stomach when someone says, "Can I give you some feedback?" Your body's learned that feedback equals a threat. People are talking about you behind your back. There's shame. You're not enough. You're bad. But here's the hardest part. Sometimes the criticism isn't even real. It's just the possibility of it that can stress us out. Oh, maybe they didn't like the way that landed, or overanalyzing that feedback conversation because it was hard for you to give. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between actual criticism and the feeling of criticism. So every time we replay that what if scenario, we are reinforcing to be in fight or flight. So let's start to name it. How does perfectionism feel in the body? I'm going to speak from personal experience, but Others of you might have had different experiences. I'm also going to speak to things that my clients have described. It's a feeling of being small, being isolated, walking on eggshells, terrified to speak up. It feels like you can't fully exhale at work. Got to be on your toes. It feels like you can't delegate tasks. You need to oversee and double check every little thing, double check your work, other people's work, those around you, triple check, double check. You're acting like Santa Claus over here. Really? Checking it twice. And honestly, the reality is oftentimes we feel like we have to prove ourselves. And it happens like over and over and over and over and over again. It's not like we prove ourselves one time, we've earned our reputation, and now we're a good person and we can make mistakes every once in a while. But it's a relentless hustle of proving and showing up and doing our best and never making a mistake. And that's why we get completely destroyed when we make a mistake or we do have that challenge or that conflict shows up. Perfectionism becomes protection. I'm flawless. They can't touch me. Or that feedback can't be real. I swear I'm a good girl. Like I did the right thing. But the truth is no one's flawless. And pretending that you are doesn't actually protect you. It just leads to more and more exhaustion. So what's the truth here? You can't control the gossip. You can't control how other people project. You can't control someone else's insecurities or shame. But what you can control is how you grip to perfectionism. Step 1. You need to claim it to change it. And this is something I say at the Evolve Vets all the time. So step 1 is claiming it. If any of this sounds like you, just say, okay, I'm a perfectionist. And let me be honest, this took me like a solid year of journaling before I was able to admit this to myself. So it's okay if it takes time, but come back to this podcast, listen to it again and again until you feel comfortable saying like, okay, that's me too. Step 2, ask for help. Find a coach, a therapist, a mentor, like a community. Anywhere you can get plugged in is so important. Step 3 is going to be practicing self-awareness. So in those moments where you're starting to notice, I'm replaying this conversation, I'm stressed about what somebody else is saying, notice it. And then the 4th step is going to be practice release. So when I first started to uncover and unravel my perfectionism, there was this thing that I understood that really stood out to me. And as I was peeling back these layers to my perfectionism, I started to notice that I was replaying conversation at 3 a.m. every night, and I wasn't getting a full night's rest. And as a manager for the last 6 years, I do a lot of feedback conversations. I have to give people good news sometimes, and sometimes it's not great news. And as a people pleaser, it was really hard for me to go into these conversations and give that honest, direct feedback. But I knew that that's what my team needed. And so after these conversations, I would go home, I would replay, analyze everything in my laying in bed, analyze it. Did I say the right thing? How did that land? Do you think that they'll still be my friend afterwards? I'm so stressed about this. And then what should I have said differently? Could I have reworded it this way? But ultimately that led to me being a less great manager because I was not showing up as confident. I was not getting the sleep that I needed to show up as my best self. And so I started to create this meditation, and it is available in the Evolve Vets membership and through Code Blue coaching. But essentially at night, I would listen to it and it would teach me to stop the replaying. It would teach me to stop the video that just kept going over and over again in my mind and truly stop beating myself up over wanting to do it better next time. I did the steps. I named it. I sought help from a coach. And that's when I started being more aware of these moments. And I started being more aware of when I would self-abandon to make other people comfortable. And then it came time for me to use this meditation, which really changed my perspective, and then practice that release, right? How do I let go of the things I'm experiencing? Because when you're not in self-worth, it's tough. It's tough to go out there and fight criticism, losses, and stings. But when you're confident and you're living aligned to your values and you can say, hey, I'm so sorry, I fucked up there, and then move on, do better next time. And that is the thing that matters. And so as you start to do these things and pull back these layers and uncover perfectionism, you'll start to notice your most evolved self is coming out of this. Or that's what I noticed when I went through the journey. And that's what people on Code Blue coaching also experience. It's not tearing down. It's not that leadership's never going to be criticized. In fact, as you grow more as a leader, you're probably going to be criticized more. It's being able to stay authentic to who you are despite the criticism, being confident in the decision that you made while also being able to look forward and say, I can do it differently next time. And here's the thing. This is where your nervous system really matters. If you love this podcast, you find yourself nodding along, thinking, this is exactly how I feel at work, and sometimes even outside of work, then I want to invite you to something even bigger. Come with me to the Evolve Vets membership. It's my online home and community for women in veterinary medicine who are done surviving and ready to start evolving. Inside the membership, you're going to find race-approved masterclasses, vet reset meditations, live monthly coaching with yours truly, and a community of women who actually get it. It's not toxic positivity. It's not just another membership you sign up for. It's learning how to manage your energy, protect your boundaries, and build a sustainable career in veterinary medicine. It's your choice to move from self-abandonment to self-devotion. And the truth is, you don't have to do it alone, my friend. Come evolve with us. There was a moment in my career when I realized I was excellent. I was a great doctor who worked hard and was dedicated to our patients. But I was also a doctor who was exhausted. I wasn't burnt out because I didn't care. But I got burnt out because I cared so much that I punished myself for being human. I overanalyzed every sentence, every word spoken, every moment, inside and outside the hospital. And it all added up. The shift and the de-shedding of the perfectionism wasn't lowering my standards. It was showing up for myself in a way that I love for myself so I can be an authentic leader, a driven person, and someone who also allows space for mistakes, space for difficult conversation, space for others to make mistakes too. My conversations often turned into, hey, let's give grace this time, but next time, let's make sure it's done, right? So that's a way to have that standard of excellence, but also not have the fear, not have the perfectionism, not have the stress and anxiety that comes alongside it. When I started to make that shift, it truly changed everything. My nervous system began to calm, my leadership improved, my relationship softened, my joy returned. I began to love medicine again. And the reality is this is happening for my clients too, as we go through this journey and we start to discuss situations and shed these layers of perfectionism, shed this emotional separation that we've experienced in veterinary medicine. This is what matters. It doesn't change your job title or the work that you do, but it shows up how you allow yourself to make mistakes. It gives yourself compassion and grace in order to show up as authentic and confident and calm as possible. So now let's cover, how do we actually evolve without lowering our standards? Because this is what I'm sure many of you are thinking right now, because I was that girl back in the day too. Number one, things that actually work. Create a rumination window. What I did and what I have many of my clients do, give yourself 10 intentional minutes, either after a hard case or at the end of a tough shift, and just write. There was a Dr. James Pennebaker from University of Texas, and he did a study where 15 minutes for 3 to 4 days consecutively, and you just journal out your deepest fears. No grammar corrections, no judging of what you put in there, but really just not censoring yourself and just laying it all out there. Get it out. What that found was they had improved immune function, lower stress hormone levels, fewer doctor visits. It improved their memory and really just increased their emotional regulation because they were able to get those fears out on paper. Now, students who did, they also had another study who showed that students who did expressive writing before an exam. So imagine yourself in vet school. If you would have done expressive writing, like, oh, I'm so afraid if I fail this test, I won't become a veterinarian, or I won't be worthy, or I will be a failure, whatever it might be. If you just let it all out, expressive writing before exams, the study showed that they actually not only offloaded that anxiety onto the page, but they were able to show up and perform better on the exams. It reduced what researchers called as cognitive load, or what our brain can process. And it also made them show up more ready for these exams in a more clear way. So think about this. When you write things out, your brain will organize, metabolize, and often let them go. Now, it's not the only solution, but it is something that works. Why does it work? Well, the neuroscience says when you write out your fears, it actually activates our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that really holds on to our rational processing. And as a result, it will begin to reduce that amygdala activity. Remember, the amygdala is the fear center, the flight, fight, freeze, and fawn, the 4 Fs. And so as we turn the dial down on our amygdala, our fear center, and then we can turn up our rational processing. Now, what we might find is more coherence. You might see a decrease in annoyance behavior. Remember how earlier we discussed the cynicism, the shame, the judgments that are coming out. That can actually reduce some of that behavior, as well as like avoidance. So oftentimes as perfectionists, we'll see not only doctors, but veterinary professionals as wholes will start to practice like an avoidance behavior. Now, this is a worldwide practice, right? So the study that was done back in the 1980s at University of Texas has now shown up in many parts of the world. So European school systems actually incorporate emotional literacy journaling, which is quite interesting because they, for 15 minutes, will just write about their fear-based writing. And so this study is now being replicated internationally. And I also saw a TikTok earlier this week that discussed, like, in Switzerland, there's this practice of 15 minutes before your kids go to bed, they just release their anxiety and fear onto a journal. And what it's actually been doing is lowering their depression and anxiety rates in children in that country. And it is so interesting to me that this is now work that's simple. It's 10 to 15 minutes. If you want to be very formal with it, the original research did say 20 minutes, but just write out your fears, like uncensored. What are you afraid of? I do this all the time, especially when I've noticed that I'm feeling afraid of something or worried about something. And honestly, usually by the end of the journal session, I feel so much better just because I've gotten out the most scary parts. And I'm like, that's not realistic. That's probably never going to happen. And it makes me feel so much better. So I really enjoy that one. Okay, so step 2, begin to separate your identity from the outcome. Brené Brown talks about this all the time. Instead of saying, I'm a bad doctor or I'm not good enough, say like, okay, I'm human. I'm allowed to make mistakes. I made a bad decision. So it's not owning who you are. It's not your identity. It's just something that happened, and that's part of life, and that's part of the human experience. Number 3, ask the diagnostic question. Is this excellence or is this fear? Right? Because if you're noticing the root of it is based on fear, then it's probably an underlying component of perfectionism and control that we can work on releasing. 4 is going to be practice self-compassion. Now, you guys have heard us talk about compassion, self-compassion, and grace all the time, but research shows that regular self-compassion actually reduces burnout and improves your resiliency in healthcare professionals. It's regulating your nervous system so you can actually sustain long-term care and long-term, honestly, jobs in veterinary medicine. It's going to be key to that piece. Number 4 is going to be practicing self-compassion. Research shows consistently that if you have self-compassion, it will reduce your likelihood of burnout and improve resiliency in healthcare professionals. So interesting, right? Some of the things that we say here at the Evolve Vets are like the internal work is actually the thing that matters the most, but it's the thing that's so hard to make time for because it means we're putting ourselves in high self-worth and making ourselves a priority. But the truth is, self-compassion isn't lowering standards. It actually is you showing up and regulating your nervous system so you can sustain this excellence for a longer period of time. Being able to say no in the short term to something that you're resistant to and setting that boundary actually means that you can be a veterinarian and in this profession so much longer. And the great thing about self-compassion is it usually spreads to compassion to others too, right? So the more grace we give ourselves, the more likely we are going to assume innocent intent to the person across the room. And then 5, let's redefine what gold standard is in a whole person model. Gold standard is not just making every right decision, making every right prescription, making no clinical mistakes, but also can include like sustainability and teamwork. And it also includes your mental health. Think about it this way. At the Evolve Vets, we describe the whole person model as mind, body, emotions, and spirit. And when all those are balanced in a way that is authentic to you, you can shed some of that perfectionism and actually show up authentically you. And that gold standard can look like, exercising 3 times a week and also, enjoying creative time, or maybe you like painting, whatever it is for you. Find that special thing and make it happen, because balance and creativity doesn't just come, in these small moments of judgment. It comes in this place of a gold standard life and living up to your best expectations and living as your evolved self really comes down to these moments where you choose to be you. You choose to not self-abandon, and you choose to let go of this perfectionism so you can show up authentically. All right, now we've talked a little bit about living aligned with your authentic values, right? That is essentially the whole concept of the whole person model. Balance isn't about scheduling things perfectly or having more time or adding more to the do list. It's really just tolerating imperfection without spiraling. It's giving yourself space to rest when you're tired, or having high standards, but also high self-respect. You can have both. You can respect yourself and be a great doctor. Both can exist at the same time. Balance is really about caring for yourself without shaming yourself. Shame. Like, I also struggle with shame, and I know many of our veterinarian friends do too. It is okay to let go of that shame and show up authentically as yourself, because you deserve a lifelong career in veterinary medicine. So the truth of all of this topic, which is really deep one, perfectionism probably helped you get here. That's why you're a veterinarian. That's why you're a veterinary professional. And you got it through organic chemistry, surgery rounds. But really, it also kind of created this high expectation, and it also kind of created this imposter syndrome, right? So you made all A's, you did it, good job, you've arrived. But now what you also have on the other side of that is something that's not sustainable long-term. If you're constantly self-criticizing, if your itty bitty shitty committee just keeps coming out, you're going to have to eventually cave to this self-punishment and this perfectionism, and it affects the people around you too. So the recommendation here is really move from this force, this fear, to confidence in yourself, confidence in those around you. Of course, like when you don't know something, admit it, learn from others, get a mentor, get a coach. But over time, you're going to start to see your skills grow. And when you do grow, start to trust in those skills, because you're smart and you're capable and you're worthy. And if there is a mistake, it's not about the person. It is about the process. So when the next mistake happens in your hospital, and your perfectionistic switch turns on, and there's a thought maybe of judgment about the other person, or how it was done, or how they didn't double check, or how they need more training, think back to yourself. Is there a process that we could improve here? Because most of the time it's not people, it's the process. So this is a huge deep dive on perfectionism. It is something that is near and dear to my heart, and has been something that I'm continuing to pull back layers to. The reality is, the more you can give yourself grace, give grace to those around you, the more fulfilled your life is going to be, the more happy your life is going to be. And my friend, you deserve to be in VetMed for as long as possible. And you deserve to show up without that self-criticism, without that anxiety that exists in the world that we created for ourselves. So sending you off with love and hugs, and together, let's stop revolving and start evolving. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Evolve Vets podcast. It truly means the world to me. If this episode supported you or sparked something new in you, please go to evolvevets.com to become a member or join our coaching program and truly continue this work beyond the podcast. Let's evolve together.